Hey, entrepreneurs and executives. Today, Rich and I are going to break down how you and your teams can have meetings with a purpose. One of the experts that I've seen over my career in meeting planning, design, structure is Rich. And I've asked him to really talk to us about how he goes about his meetings or training, presentation, designs to make sure they maximize the efficiency of the time spent together. So, Rich, I want to really dive into this with you today and really understand what is the framework that you have put in place over these years to really maximize having purposeful meetings. We've all read Meetings Suck, which is a book that I think Cameron Herold put together, right?
And even death
And
by meeting is the other
Death by
one.
meeting is
Yeah.
another one. And we've even heard, why are you setting hour meetings? Just set 7-minute meetings or 30-minute meetings. So there's a time component to it. There's kind of a framework that I think sometimes we drop. We just have this meeting in our calendar. We show up, we look at each other and go, okay, what are we going to talk about? Talk to us a little bit about what you've designed. I'd like to probe a little bit deeper so our entrepreneurs, executives can maybe take some snippets and how to have better meetings with a better purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me lay out the framework and then we can go progressively deeper into any of the components of it. The framework to look at would be first look at the organizational needs for that meeting, that training, that offsite, whatever it is. What are the organizational needs? The second one would be what are the individual needs? Then the purpose, then the outcome, and then what's called a big chunk agenda. Those are the 5 pieces of really effective meeting design. I'll give you a highlight on each one and then pause and see what questions you may have. On organizational needs, when you're looking at organizational needs, you're asking yourself, what serves the company? If you have a, whatever your company is, John St. Pierre Limited is the company, what will serve LTD? What is it that is going to drive profit? What's going to drive sales? What's going to drive retaining? What's going to drive productivity? That's what you're looking at. What serves LTD? And the second one on individual needs is what do you believe that the people who are attending this meeting on whatever that topic is, what do you believe they think they need?
Okay.
Now, it's best on the second one on individual needs if you're actually doing a survey or if you're doing interviews. If you wanted to do a shortcut, you would rely on your own belief about the people who are attending from what you know of them on what you believe they may think they need. Be better off if you checked in with them and they could speak for themselves. In the third component around the purpose, it's often a restating of those needs. The purpose is stated in just plain language. What are you trying to do here? Again, the purpose should restate some of those needs because that's what you're trying to do here is serve some of the organizational and individual needs. The next one and the fourth piece is the outcome. Here's where we get really buttoned down. On the outcome, it must be measurable by the end of the meeting and behavioral on behalf of the participants. So what will the participants be able to do differently as a result of having attended this meeting? It cannot be just information transfer. No, what do you want them to do differently? It cannot be John talks about the 5 rules. No, that's behavioral on behalf of the facilitator. It needs to be behavioral on behalf of the participants and measurable at the end of the meeting. The last piece, the fifth one, is the big chunk agenda. A big chunk agenda is very simple. It's saying, okay, if you've got 60 minutes or 90 minutes for a meeting, or even if it's 2 days and it's some type of a summit you're getting together for, you're going to chunk that out into, an opening introduction, your breaks, how much time you need for breaks, how much time do you need for meals, how much time do you need to wrap up or have people transfer out? Often when you're looking at an outcome that's behavioral in nature on behalf of the participants, there's going to be some type of a workshop that people put whatever you are teaching or training, they put that to use in an environment which is a safe environment for them. So that would just be a couple of nuggets along each of the 5 there.
Is this framework that you designed, the 5 steps, organizational needs, individual needs, purpose, outcome, and big chunk, Does that apply to one type of meeting versus another type of meeting, or does it apply to all meetings? Would it be fair to say that your answer is no, this applies to all meetings?
I think it applies to all meetings that you'd like to intentionally achieve something.
Okay. So when should you be meeting with somebody when you're not intentionally trying to achieve something?
I don't believe you should. Sometimes we get together just to chat, just to develop relationship, just to debrief things. Sometimes it's a quick thing, particularly on our longer meetings. You're getting together with a sales team for 2 hours. And let's say you've got this concept that you want to talk about objection handling with your sales team about a new product or a new service that you're offering. Yeah, you should go through. You have 2 hours with your sales team. I don't care if your sales team is 2 people deep or if it's 20 people deep.
Yeah.
You're going to want to figure out what is the outcome at the end of this and how are we going to go about approaching that outcome? Well, before you get to the outcome, you better look at needs. Before you even get to needs, of course, you're going to have this concept of the need for a meeting. Then often you've got to stop yourself and say, before I go too deep on objection handling and get into my content of objection handling, that's where everybody usually wants to start. We need to talk about objection handling with the sales team. Let's go get a book on objection handling. What PowerPoint slides could we put up? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute, back up and do your correct design to make sure you're actually thinking about what you want people to do differently after the meeting is over. You've got to remember there's only one reason why you're having all meetings, is because it'll change behavior after the meeting. If you're not meeting to change behavior after the meeting, I'm not sure why you're meeting. Ultimately, the behavior you want to change should lead towards either better performance or higher retention of the people who you want to retain. It's performance and retention. I'll repeat what I just said emphatically. If you're not meeting to drive performance and retention and to have people behave differently at the end of the meeting, what are you meeting for? So if you want to do that, this is a design that will get you to the heart of it. But again, you're going to start with this concept and you're going to want to jump into content. You've got to back up, do this 5-step process. After you do the 5-step process, then you prune your content by the outcomes. You're going to end up finding you cannot just talk about anything you want to talk about because you've got to serve the outcome. That's the whole reason for the meeting, to serve that outcome. Get rid of things that are just kind of interesting or cool or turned a light bulb on, or you just heard something on a podcast yesterday. Like, get rid of the interesting, cool stuff. Not to say you can't do something interesting and cool in it, but if that's all it is a head turner, get rid of it. That might belong somewhere else, but not here if it doesn't serve the outcome.
Yeah, but just clarification here. A lot of companies and executives have recurring meetings. Every 2 weeks, our leadership team is going to get together and talk about what's going on in the business. It's possible that we're not trying to change any behavior. We're just trying to meet to update everybody on what's going on. Is that an appropriate meeting?
I don't believe the reason is to get together to update. Usually you want to get together for the purpose of updating, either because someone's behavior after the meeting is going to be in support of whatever the update is. But if it's not in support of, you at least want them to be informed so they're not contradicting it. So they're not working against whatever that update is from another team, another department, whatever it is. You may be surprised also that it's not just to support it and to not contradict it, but there may be resources available on your team that you didn't think of yourself. So that would be the reason to get together. But at the end of the day, all of that is talking about what happens after the meeting. I would still submit to you, even in that update meeting, if all it is an update, don't have a meeting. Record yourself, send an email. You could do it in a video. If you're meeting with people and they're not participating in the meeting and you're just talking at them, why was it a meeting?
Well, that speaks to the behavioral actions by the participant, not just the presenter or the person organizing the meeting. And I think there's a component of respect here. And it's an interesting dilemma you put yourself in. A lot of people move from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting.
Yeah.
And if a meeting's scheduled for an hour, they're in the meeting for an hour and 2 minutes. And they're like, okay, I got to go to the next meeting, right? And they keep going, and then they go to the next one, and they go to the next one, and they go to the next one. A lot of this seems like time management. And what I mean by that, and I'm just thinking about this out loud, what are some strategies that could help execute better preparation, right? We talked about the 5 P's earlier in our career, right? Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. 6
Yes.
P's,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
The 6 P's. In this case, I think the biggest problem is preparation. And I know you, as an example, especially when you're having large summits or meetings with large groups of people, you probably put more preparation into the meeting than the actual meeting itself.
Yes.
So if a meeting's 2 days, you're probably putting 2 weeks of preparation, getting everything aligned. But yet when we go from meeting to meeting to meeting, there's so little time to prepare for the next one. So you kind of go in it and you're on the fly. You're trying to figure out what you're going to accomplish right then and there. What would you advise people to do to be better prepared for each meeting they have, whether it be a time management suggestion or some sort of preparation suggestion? What do you do?
So in a meeting where I'm running it, I'm facilitating it, I'm leading it, I'm responsible for it. Every meeting you have to schedule at least 3 meetings for. So you have the meeting itself that you're going to block off in your schedule. You also need to block off in your schedule when you schedule that meeting, block off in your schedule when you're going to do the prep. The other meeting you have to schedule is when you're going to do the debrief. And the debrief may be you alone reflecting on areas to continue, areas to improve, or it may be who needs to be involved in that debrief to talk about areas to continue, areas to improve based on that meeting. As a general rule of thumb, I try to schedule 2 to 3 times the amount of time of the meeting. I schedule 2 to 3 times that in prep. So if I've got a 1-hour meeting, I'm going to schedule 2 hours of prep and a 1-hour debrief. So 1-hour meeting, obviously, then turns into 4 hours. If it's not important enough to do that, to block that time off, I'm going to question, is a meeting that important? If the meeting is important enough to have, then it's important enough to block that time off. And you go, the higher number of people who you're going to have involved in that meeting, the more important it is to really be on your game. However, I'd even say in our one-on-one meetings, we want to be prepared. We want to get to the outcomes that we were trying to get to when the meeting was called. So you may not go 2 to 1 on prep time to a meeting on a one-on-one reoccurring meeting. You're going to have it with that in particular, you're going to have a big chunk agenda on how you want to use your 1 hour. The thing that gets missed on that one is scheduling the retrospective. So looking at maybe quarterly on a maintenance schedule, having a conversation with the person about how you're having conversations. So it's taking a break from talking about the topics to talk about how we talk. Hey, is the way we're working together working for you? What are a couple of ways that maybe I've presented obstacles to this being an optimal use of our time? What are some ways maybe you've created obstacles to this being an optimal use of our time? Should we relook at the big chunk agenda? Scale of 1 to 10, how much value are you getting from these meetings? All those types of questions, those shouldn't happen ad hoc. That's a scheduled retrospective that just on a vanilla recommendation, you would do it quarterly to talk with someone about how is it going, how we're doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the challenges I think that managers and employees deal with, and it's well described by the Death by Meeting book, right? Surely many employees feel like there's just way too many meetings. The manager who has to prepare for the meetings and run the meetings feels a necessity to meet because they want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on and that everybody's aligned in the organization and so on and so forth. At what point do you think that a manager specifically should look at the meetings they have on their books and realign and say, Rich, we're meeting every other week. We probably need to meet every other month. When do you think that evaluation happens and whose responsibility, ultimately does that, is it the employee's place to articulate to the manager, look, like, we're meeting every other week. Can we move that to one every other month? Or is it the manager's responsibility to look at it and self-diagnose? I probably have too many meetings.
Well, I could go a number of ways on that. You should have an open enough relationship with the person that if it's not working for you, they would let you know. However, if I had to select one or the other, I'd say it'd be the manager's responsibility. I know what I do in our business with the team that I lead is annually, we look at every reoccurring meeting that's in your schedule. Yeah. Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 on how much value you get from that meeting. And if it's not an 8, 9, or 10, what is your recommendation on how to make it an 8, 9, or 10? And there's no pressure around if it's a one-on-one meeting with me and you're getting a value of a 5 on it. It may be because we're meeting too often. It may be because you're not being prepared. It may be because I'm not being prepared. We're just not aligned on how and why that's a good use of time. And it should be something that we look at. So it definitely requires a fair amount of vulnerability on behalf of the leader to have somebody evaluating what they're getting out of a meeting that you're running, but they're also doing that within the company of other meetings I'm not running, of what they're doing with other teams that are reoccurring meetings. I believe it should be looked at annually and evaluated in that way with open conversation to try to make it better. Who doesn't want to have better meetings? The way you do it is you talk about it.
Well, that's a big takeaway, Rich, that I'm going to grab from this is doing it, sending out a survey to your team. What are all the meetings you have on a monthly basis that are or quarterly basis that are recurring? Rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, collect all that information in and see how is the organization benefiting from these and what's their feedback, right? And it's to your point, it's not a personal thing. It's not like my meetings with you are 3, therefore you're offended. It's maybe because we're meeting too much, we're meeting too little. There could be a lot of information there on a grand scale. And I think way too many times everybody gets on autopilot. It's in my calendar, therefore I'm showing up.
Yes.
It's in my calendar, therefore I'm showing up. And there's not enough white space for thinking time or planning time, preparation time. An idea that I came up with here just listening to you is, instead of having an hour meeting, should I have a 45-minute meeting? And you could argue maybe 30 minutes or therefore. But what if the first 15 minutes of the meeting was my prep time and the 30 or 45 minutes after was the actual meeting time? And sometimes there's little trickeries in your calendar, which is instead of having the meeting start at 10 o'clock, the meeting's gonna start at 10:15. That gives me time to get off the other call, refresh my brain, think about why we're meeting here today. And I do understand if it's a recurring meeting, you don't need 2 hours to prep for that 1 hour necessarily.
Yes, right.
Because it may be a recurring meeting where you have the notes from the prior meetings, you know what you're trying to accomplish. But to have some prep time would be a huge improvement to my meetings, as an example. I'm too frequently going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And I think 99% of entrepreneurs or managers can relate to that. But if you just move your calendar and move the meeting to start at 15 past the hour and make it a 45-minute, chances are you'll still accomplish what you need to accomplish because you'll have better preparation and knowing what you're trying to do when you get in the meeting.
Yeah, and we're moving a little bit from meeting conversation into some block scheduling conversation, which is okay. Sure. I know there are some people that the way they do their prep for reoccurring meetings is they require prep from the learner by midnight the night before. And they have a time in the morning where they prep for the rest of their meetings through that day. That would be probably the most common thing that I have seen people do is they protect that time then, just like it's a meeting with somebody else. You protect your time alone for you to prep your day and the meetings that you're going to have through the day. I will tell you, one of the things we've recently moved to in our organization is moving to a standard of 45-minute meetings that start at 15 minutes after the hour.
Get out.
The reason why,
seriously,
if you start on the hour, so you start at 10 o'clock in the morning and you send out a meeting invite 10 o'clock to 10:45.
Yep.
Everybody knows 10:45 is a bit of a false ceiling, and you often eat into the 10:45 to 11 o'clock time period. But if you schedule it at 10:15 to 11, nobody's going to blame you for not showing up early. As a matter of fact, nobody shows up early. When a meeting is called at 10:15, you start at 10:15, then you get to 11. Everybody's used to getting off at the top of the hour. That leaves you 15 minutes. Sure, you could do prep, You could also, in this day and age when we're over meeting on Zoom, you could also use the restroom. You could take a walk around your house. You could return a phone call, return an email, refill your water, do whatever you want to do that's going to reset you and prepare you for your next 45-minute meeting.
That's pretty ironic that in this conversation of you talking about, having meetings with a purpose and how to design these, that in my head, I was like, maybe here's something I should be doing differently. And sure enough, it's something your organization is implementing. And I had no idea of that through our conversations in the past. So it does seem to me, again, going back to proper preparation prevents piss poor performance, condensing and blocking a little bit your schedule will help you provide better meeting design. I got one last question for you, Rich. If you had to state what is the one thing globally across all managers they need to do to have better meetings with a purpose, what would that be?
I would suggest it would be ending the meeting 10 minutes early to talk about and get clarity on what decisions did we make in this meeting, who's going to do what by when, and who's going to be informed. Who else needs to know about what happened in this meeting? Way too often, decisions are made in a meeting with the people who are on the call or on Zoom, and it's not properly communicated to the other people who it impacts. So if you end generally every meeting you have 10 minutes early to say, what decisions did we make? Who's going to do what by when? And who else needs to know about the outcomes of this meeting? You're going to be in better communication with all the other people that those decisions impacted.
Powerful.